Not a busy week at all in Nebraskaville. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam McKewon along with Jimmy Watkins for the Pick 6 podcast. This week, it's November 11th, 2021. Evan's at the dentist. Hello, Dentist Evan. Hello. He's not here.
His entire family is at the dentist.
His picks are, though. He'll have his picks because he's up 12 on me and I think 5 on you. Hello, everyone. This is the Pick 6 podcast. Scott Frost saves his job but has to fire 4 assistants edition. And it has been quite a week in Huskerville. It started on Monday when Scott Frost retained his job, took a pay cut, restructured his contract, and then 2 hours later announced that he fired 4 of his offensive assistants. It's not quite like, a whacking because Scott kept his job. But it's almost like, below there was a conversation with Mario Verduzco, Matt Lubick, Greg Austin, and Ryan Held of like, I've done all I can for you. And so they were sent packing. We've only heard from one of them, Ryan Held, thanking Scott Frost. The other 3, I think, have been relatively quiet. Jimmy, how are you doing?
Doing all right. It was it's a reminder that...
Welcome to the Nebraska Athletics Beat, Jimmy.
A healthy reminder that, as my mom always told me growing up, not a lot of loyalty out there in this world.
Oh, I don't know.
Not a lot of loyalty out there.
I think 6 years is pretty loyal in the college football industry.
It depends on your perspective.
It does.
Depends on your perspective. Scott wasn't going down with the ship. Let's put it that way.
He didn't. I don't know. The question that's hard to know with him is whether or not he seriously thought about it. We'll get to that in a minute. And what Nebraska does now. So we're going to talk a little Husker football, as well we should. It's a bye week. Then we're going to talk a little Husker hoops and the men's basketball team. I may touch on the women a little bit. They're going to play tonight. We're recording this on a Thursday. Jimmy will cover the Husker men Friday night.
Double woof earlier this week. First football, then basketball. Successive
the
days.
women were fine. They won by 109.
Yeah.
But Fred Hoiberg's crew, Fred's pissed.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll try to get to volleyball. I don't know. They're in that. It's not unlike women's basketball in the sense that in NCAA volleyball, there's multiple tiers within the top 25. And there's that super high echelon tier, and Nebraska's maybe just outside it, where there might be like 3 or 4 teams that are going to win the national championship. And Nebraska is usually in that tier with Stanford and Penn State and a few others. But in this particular year, it feels like there's a new group up there. Texas, Pittsburgh, Louisville, new teams. So we'll talk. Maybe we'll get to that, but maybe we won't. All right, let's start with Nebraska football. Huge seismic moment on Monday. I'm going to work back and just talk a little bit about what I'd kind of felt and heard going into the Ohio State game and into Monday. The Purdue loss was not good. All right, I think everybody kind of saw how I reacted to that. It was a big game for Nebraska. They did not manage that game very well in the second half. I think it was sort of a startling set of events in the second half when you watch the way Nebraska played offense and some of the dumb things that they did. So that game was bad. Trev Alberts was at his son's wedding. He turns his phone off when Nebraska's ahead. When he turns it back on, they lost. And Trev was not happy about that at all. He just wasn't happy. And he told Evan and I on Monday that that loss along with the Minnesota loss shook him. The Minnesota loss was concerning for the way that Nebraska started the game. The Purdue loss was concerning for the way that Nebraska allowed Purdue to set how that game was going to go. Then they play Ohio State. Nebraska played pretty well against Ohio State. It was pretty impressive. I think before that moment, there was already thoughts and conversations in place of like, all right, let's see what happens against Ohio State, but this is kind of where we want to go. I think Scott and Trev had multiple conversations on Sundays where they talked about the program and where they thought it was and where they thought it could go. There are multiple schools of thought. One of the schools of thought is, well, Trev is not going to make the same mistake Steve Peterson made, and he's going to give Scott another year because if you make the choice now, there's going to be something really, really divisive at the end. And you don't want to put yourself behind, put yourself in a hard spot in a narrow place very quickly. You want to give yourself options. The second school of thought, and this is the one that I ascribe to, is that Trev Alberts is so confident in his ability to help shape and mold Scott Frost. I think Trev sees some of himself in Scott, which seems kind of ironic because when you talk to the two guys, they don't appear like they could be any different. But I think Trev actually sees a little bit of himself in Scott and wants to try to make this thing work. If you believe the first story, you kind of think that this is sort of a political Machiavellian move where, Trev's trying to maneuver for the future and he's looking at the long-term success and he says, well, if he fails next year, then everybody knows he's a failure. If you look at the second story, you see this athletic director who is often made unsentimental decisions, making a bit of a sentimental heart decision because he wants to see it work with Scott. Which of those two do you think is more likely? I ascribe to the second one, but which one do you ascribe to?
I would lean a little bit. I think it's a little of both because I believe Trev when he said I was looking for a way to keep Scott. I don't think the way that they've been playing. I mean, the Ohio State game was encouraging, but again, you could also paint that as same old late game mistakes that have been plaguing the program since Scott got here, right? So that accompanied with the Purdue and the Minnesota letdowns, which are again repeats from what we've seen from Scott Frost Nebraska teams past. You had to be looking a little bit for reasons to keep Scott. So there is a little bit of, I do think Trev wanted to make it work with Scott specifically. I also think we've talked about this before. I just don't see there were too many good options the other way. I mean, to empty the staff cupboard at this point would have made with the recruiting situation the way it is and the loyalty that this team would have that has towards Scott. I mean, Nebraska is already. I was listening to you and Sip on the way up here today. I think you guys were saying Nebraska's already tied for the worst team in the Big Ten with Illinois since Scott got here, right? And you're taking it, then you're pushing it even further back. Scott talked about this job being a big fix when he came in. Might even be a bigger fix for the next guy.
2022 will be a lost year if Frost had been
exactly.
Fired. Now, you can accept that it's a lost year, but it would have been.
Exactly. So, a little A in terms of Trev is doing this because it's probably the best thing for the program's positioning going forward. If it doesn't work with Scott next year, you can maneuver chess pieces in a way that it won't be such a disaster. You would presume that the recruiting class or the recruiting situation will normalize itself a little bit more heading into 2023 than it is heading into 2022. But there is also a little bit. I mean, Trev he's the same. He comes from the same family tree that Scott does. So I think it's a little bit of both. But if I had to pick one, I think it's Trev is maybe masking a little bit of that first story with the second story. He's saying, I love Scott. I want us to where this is, we want to stay we want to err on the side of loyalty when we can. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt that loyalty might be the best positioning for the program going forward.
I think he's enormously confident, Trev Alberts is. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think if you're going to be in one of these positions, you got to have a little bit of an ego. And I think he has a little bit of one. And I think I think to some degree, he wants to transfer some of that to Scott. And there needs to be a confidence there. I think one of the things that Nebraska has struggled with really since Frost got there is Frost's comfort level with the job as a whole. Like, from the minute Scott got there, he's been very open-handed with the players. The players tell us whatever they want. He's been pretty open-handed with the assistant coaches, but Scott himself has been often very guarded and very,
less so this year.
A little less, but generally speaking, guarded. Like, you kind of saw it a little bit on Wednesday, where there are a few questions he's asked, and all of a sudden there's sort of a guardedness there. Like it's when somebody says, "Are people advising you on who you might hire as an offensive coordinator?" And his answer was very quick and very brisk. There's a couple people advising. Like there's a certain level of just I don't know. Like it's always been there. Like not a full embrace of the job. Not that he's not working hard, but that it doesn't seem to give much joy. And it doesn't seem to be something where it doesn't seem to very, very often be very fun. Like it doesn't seem to be something that's like, man, he doesn't have the joie de vivre of Jojo Doman, who is now done at Nebraska because he getting hand surgery. But Jojo kind of has that in day out, unusual Tim Tebow-esque passion for whatever. And I've struggled to sense that at times with Scott, and I feel like Trev goes into each day with a similar kind of passion. Like it's.
But isn't Scott telling us by taking this big pay cut and firing all his buddies that isn't that his way of showing the passion?
That's a great question. And it's the one that's not easy to answer with him, because I think there would have been a time when he came back to Nebraska that it would have been closer to, look, you guys wanted me, and I'm the guy that wanted Oregon, and I'm the guy that wanted UCF, and so I'm going to kind of do things my way. Is that all right with you? Yeah. Because you guys didn't figure it out, and you guys had Mike Riley, and you guys fired Bo Pelini. So I'm going to come in here with my crew, and we're going to come in here, and we'll win the games, and then you guys can stay out, and the boys' club will figure it out. And they didn't figure it out. That's part of the issue. It's like what he assembled did not figure it out. In fact, it was kind of dysfunctional. And when disciplinary issues ran across their desk, they didn't handle it very well. And Bill Moose, the previous AD, who I wish you had known, because I like Bill a lot, and he was really good to work with. I think Moose, very early in his tenure, saw what was going on, and he's like, I'm backing off. Like, I'm not going to deal with it. And that's exactly what he did. He just is like, I'm going to let these guys do what they want. They obviously don't want my input, so I'm going to stay back here and let them succeed or fail.
Kind of comes from a different background than Trev, though.
He does.
It makes more sense for him to put his hands up, and where Trev is like, I've been here, I've done all this too. So
I think part of it is that, yes, you're right, that Trev wants to make this work, and he feels like this is something he's been called to do, and he's not just going to let it fail. I think if you left it to Scott may have just wanted to say, you know what, I like what I'm doing. I like the people I've got. If a few of them want to leave, they can, but you're not going to tell me to do anything. The big question is, why did he agree? And he did. So he was out there on Wednesday defending that decision, says he wants to become more of a CEO coach. We'll see if he can do that. Trev said, I think Scott can.
Scott said he wanted to do a lot of things that I'm skeptical that he actually wanted to do. I'm skeptical that he wanted to actually become a more CEO coach. That guy is married to the offensive side of the ball and will continue to be. He'll be the very involved divorced dad of the offense instead of being married to it now, right?
Right.
He said that he brought the plan to Trev to fire all his buddies.
That's what Trev said.
Sure. I think that can be true, but I think it can be true that he did that because he knew what happened otherwise, right? He knew he might be forced to do it anyways, so why not be proactive about it? And then the third thing...
Although if he was objective, anybody who's objective, and we can talk about this in a minute, anyone who's objective would have to take a step back and say, he hasn't had a good year. He hasn't had a good 4 years as the offensive coordinator, much less the head coach. The offense is the problem. So continue.
And to your point, he said, we've been doing things the same way for a while. We have to change. We have to change at a certain point. Definition of insanity and all that stuff, right? And then the third thing was that I just cannot possibly believe is that he said that it was his idea to reduce the buyout and change the contract. He's not thinking about that. I don't believe that Scott Frost is sitting there drawing up plans for the future of Nebraska, even if he's thinking about changing staff and what the football product has to look like and thinking about it. He's not going to think on his own without the outside pressure of this season and things not going well. He's not going to be like, you know what? I think I want to coach for less money.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why he would even say that. That's weird.
Well, he didn't necessarily say it. He said it was an easy decision. I think at the end of the day,
someone asked. I think he said in that press conference that he brought that idea to Trev, not the other way around, right?
Well, I think probably the way it was brought up is, Scott. I mean, it's you look at your contract and. One of the challenges here is that if you wanted to bring in, a super high-level offensive coordinator, I mean, you're going to have to pay that person about $1.5 million, and at this moment, you're making I think there's a logic that you can sort of work your way through that makes sense and makes the conversation work, Jimmy. And so I would agree with you that there's a sense of like the contract restructure. I think the firing of the coaches, I suspect it was hard for a couple of those decisions. And I'm not trying to knock any of them, but I suspect it was enormously hard for him to tell Mario Verduzco, you're gone. I'm guessing there were tears there, both sides. You didn't get to know Mario too well. I think you only talked to him a couple times because he didn't talk much this year. Mario used to talk every week, and he's a good guy. There are people who you come across in the business, and I've covered a few over the years of people that I just really appreciated, just as like human beings. And Mario didn't answer questions that well over the last 2 years. He really didn't. He was weird and guarded and all these other things, but the guy's a real guy. And he's genuine and all those things. And so it's hard to see somebody like that let go 2 games before the season. I can't imagine what his goodbye was with Adrian and the other quarterbacks. That must have been very, very hard. So I'm guessing that part was really hard for Scott. The reality is they had to get those things done so that they can get a new staff in there because whatever happens the final 2 weeks, and I think those 2 weeks matter. I think the way they play matters. People can say it doesn't matter.
In what sense?
How do I put it? It matters, like it matters on a sense of making the people within the program, because you're not gonna like replace 85 players with 85 new players. They need something to stake to. And now that these coaches are fired, they need something to stake to. And that psychological advantage going into the offseason, I don't think they're going to beat Wisconsin. I don't. But let's say they beat Iowa. Iowa may win 8 or 9 games. I don't know. They're not very good. They beat Northwestern by 5. They're not that good. If they could find a way to beat Iowa by 3, the lift that'll give the program going into the offseason, it'll be real. I think I know the program and the fan base well enough to know that would be real. So the next 2 weeks matter, but what really matters is the 3 months after that. So December, January, February. By February, you got your coaching staff, and you're going into winter conditioning, and so the next 3 months are crucial for how they're going to set up success in the future. Inevitably, they have to find an offensive coordinator. That appears to be Frost's priority. That interests me. I think that's an interesting thought. To me, I think there's other things that you could try to focus on. Portal, offensive line coach, I don't know, but he's made it hiring an offensive coordinator a priority.
Goes back to my point about him being the divorced dad of the
right.
offense. He's still very much and he
has to be. But he
yes,
has to hire them.
Of course.
So that's got to happen over the next 2 to 3 weeks. One would think there's going to be a lot of names that are thrown around. I think it's really, really important that in the process that they be quick, but they don't hurry, and they really think about what kind of offense do we want to run that fits the Big Ten. And I did this exercise a couple years ago with Evan. We were driving somewhere for a game. I can't remember, Purdue or something like that. And I said, tell me what you would do in terms of tell me what your offense is. I'll do the same thing with you. Tell me what it is.
Right now?
Yeah. Knowing the context. You're not starting in a vacuum. You're not starting an offense for any league. You're starting it for the league that you're in. Tell me what it is.
I would want to be able to have the math advantage in the run game. That comes with it, running a lot of zone read option. So I'd do that in the run game. And then I'd have a pass game where it kind of works in the inverse that Nebraska's works. I think you throw a bunch of quick stuff early and then force teams to play up and then take the shots. So that would be, and then personnel would be key for all this stuff too. If I were to build an offense, I would simply build a better offensive line than Nebraska has so far. But that's separate from the schematic side of things. But yeah, I would want to be a quarterback who can run, but maybe is not. Maybe I'm not putting the onus so much onto him run. It's just that I make the defense think about it. I make the defense think about him running, and then I make the defense think about. I make the defense have to come up so that we can throw it over their heads.
So let's say there's 15, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, chess pieces on a table. They're all the kings or the queens. There's 14 of them because there's 14 teams in the Big Ten, right? The minute you said I want read option, zone read, you take your arm and you sweep 12 of them off the table. You're down to 2 teams, Nebraska and Penn State, and Penn State head coach is probably not going to be there. That's how fast that happened. So you're an outlier offense already. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Urban Meyer ran that offense for as long as he was there. Now, the minute that Urban Meyer left, how many times did C.J. Stroud run the zone read?
Yeah, I mean, he did it once, and that was a surprise to me. They don't run him a lot at all.
No, they don't. They don't want to run. And the reason they don't want to run is because offenses about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago changed. And they changed from this... let's run the quarterback a whole bunch and maybe we can win a game that way to we're not going to win the biggest games unless our quarterback sits his ass in the pocket and anchors there and throws to superstar players all around him. If our quarterback is out running around, he's going to get hurt. We're going to have to go to our backup quarterback, and our backup quarterback sucks because most backup quarterbacks today aren't very good because they're all transferring, right? So once upon a time, the backup quarterback at Texas A&M was Kyler Murray. He was playing behind Kenny Hill. Kenny Hill.
Yeah.
Well, then Kyler Murray's not there anymore. And then Kyler Murray's the backup to Baker Mayfield. Right? And so, once upon a time at Alabama, Jalen Hurts was the backup to Tua. And then he transferred. You don't have the pad anymore.
In between, he won an SEC championship game, though.
And he helped him win a national championship, no less. So... there's elements in there, Jimmy, that are important. They're important to sort of cement and recall because that's fine what you just said, but that's kind of what they've been doing.
Right. I don't think it's necessarily I just think that the ideas that they have just don't match the personnel all the time. You can't have an offense based, a pass game based in shot plays if your offensive line can't hold up. So that's. If you have an offensive line that's better as a run blocking unit than a pass blocking unit, which is what this group is, then okay, maybe you do want to.
Not much.
It's better if you had to pick one that they were better at. It's that.
Yeah.
Then maybe okay, you do want to change the schematics up a little bit, but I think that they also are thinking, well, we're going to go into the transfer portal and we're going to get a tackle and we're going to upgrade the personnel. Scott said it. It's not going to be a wholesale change. Whether it's anyone's ideal offense or not, it's going to be that. So just
now you got
get
65
personnel.
Power 5 teams, and I'm just working this exercise with you. 65, chess pieces on the table. You wipe off about 55 of them when you decide that you want to be a read option team. You do. You're in the boat with Oklahoma. They like doing it. Texas likes doing it. There's a few other teams that like doing it. There's virtually no one in the Pac-12 except Utah. They do it with Cam Rising. There's very few teams in the SEC that want to do that, at least win. And there's one other team in the Big Ten. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're embracing sort of a group of 5 offense. Now, I suspect that one of the things that Scott's going to be a stickler on is the exact same thing that you want. We want a quarterback in the +1 run game, as you call it. So then you've got to go out and find a coordinator who's willing to incorporate that. And you're always going to get more run yards out of that. Your quarterback's probably going to get hurt, but you're going to get more run yards out of it. Then you've got to figure out how to get more efficient. You've got to find a way to get more efficient. And oh, by the way, the read option, the RPO scheme, it's hard for offensive linemen because they don't know play to play whether you're running it or throwing it. They don't always know. For what it's worth, I think that's exactly what Nebraska's going to try to do. They're going to try to find an offensive coordinator who fits the vision that you've just laid out there. 4 years ago, I think I would have sat here, hell, I did sit here, and say, Scott Frost is on the cutting edge of offense. About 2 years later, before the 2019 Wisconsin game, Javon DeWitt, who was on his way out the door, he was going to go to North Carolina, gave an interview. And it was about Wisconsin on offense. And he said that Wisconsin is so different from everybody else that they're actually hard to prepare for. Because what had been true of Wisconsin 25 years ago, a lot of teams were doing what Wisconsin did 25 years ago. Now they're not. Now everybody's 7-on-7, spread, RPO, all that action. And Nebraska, the cutting-edge offense that worked for Frost in Central Florida, he imported it to Nebraska, and it does gain yards, but it's not efficient in the red zone. And so defenses have a template for Nebraska now. They're like, don't give up the big play. Don't give up a 70-yard touchdown, and when they get inside the 20, they're going to blink. There's going to be a standoff down there, and we're going to win.
I think
because
Scott. I
they're
think
not
Scott
gonna
would.
score.
I think Scott would argue, and I think you could argue that that's not necessarily a structure problem. That's an execution problem, and that's where the personnel. That's where the transfer portal could help, right? I think that's me arguing for my ideal offense. I think if we get a quarterback who's more precise and more decisive in the red zone with that same scheme, the red zone offense looks a lot different.
I think that's fair. That's a big challenge.
It is.
You're asking a quarterback. You're asking the quarterback to either A, be the guy that gets better all of a sudden, and the evidence for Adrian is, iffy.
And by the way, down by the goal line, they actually works like the quarterback run stuff. A lot of their run game, when they score rushing touchdowns, it's Adrian.
It's right.
On those kinds of plays.
Yeah, it works okay once you're inside the 5. From the high red zone, which is the 20 down to the 8, it doesn't. I mean, you don't get you have to kick field goals. You have to be able to throw the football, and they're not very good at doing that, and they haven't been very good at doing it for 4 years. So first, they've got to go find an offensive coordinator. I suspect it's going to be someone that's closer to your template. What I would prefer is someone who's closer to what Wisconsin does. I don't think they're going to do that, but I think that's probably where they're going to go because I think that's what Scott Frost knows, and he likes the quarterback run game. Then you have to get a coordinator who can also go out and hire maybe some of his guys to come in and be cohesive on offense. So you need a line coach. I don't know that you need a quarterback's coach. Hopefully your offensive coordinator can do that. So you can have an offensive coordinator who's the quarterback's coach, maybe a line coach, maybe a running back's coach. That's 3 people.
And then
maybe you take Sean Becton and he runs the wide receivers, and then maybe you have a special teams coordinator. Now, for what it's worth.
Potentially, as Scott said, potentially.
Scott's argument about a special teams coordinator, the fact that Mike Dawson has done a good job, let's be clear. They do look better on covering kicks. Fair.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing in returns. They don't even want to return the ball. They're unwilling to return the ball.
They're fair catching kickoffs. Oliver Martin.
They still want to do it.
Yeah.
They're whether it's Martin or it's Alante Brown and kickoffs, they don't want to do it, and that's a problem. Like when you have so few return yards, it's almost like we just want to possess the ball. We don't even want to risk anything. That's a punt return game that was perhaps the worst in the country this year. So you can't just set that aside. You do want to get somebody in there who's really aggressive and coaches the returners really well. And I don't feel like they have that right now because Mike Dawson isn't a skill player, wasn't a skill player in college.
Becton handles the returners.
He does do that, but he's also coaching a position. There's a lot of pieces there.
They're spread thin.
What you would ideally like is someone who just coordinates the special teams, and that's all they do. And then what you want that person to be is either an elite evaluator of talent, somebody who can go out and go out and be a pretty good recruiter, or can like watch film and tell you where a player should play, or you want them to be a really good recruiter. So you get a special teams coordinator who not only recruits their position, like the kickers and the specialists, but has an area and can kick ass in that area and recruits it a little bit better. The other thing that was interesting to me is this was said on the broadcast, the Ohio State broadcast, where Joel Klatt and
Gus Johnson. My mom was pumped that I was in the same press room with Gus. By the way, she's a big Gus Johnson.
He's very good.
Yeah.
They said that Scott wants to recruit Texas better, which I thought was an interesting, okay, all right. Hard to recruit Texas because
A lot of people trying.
Nebraska doesn't play in Texas anymore. Well, they didn't. I mean, when Nebraska played in Texas twice a year, it was easy to recruit there. And Nebraska would sign, 5 to 8 players from Texas. But they don't do that anymore because they don't play there. So it's challenging to recruit there. But it's possible that you could get somebody in your system who knows how to recruit that state. It is. It's now the SEC recruits the hell out of it. The Pac-12 recruits it fairly well. The Big 12 obviously recruits it. All the Big 12 schools do. And Nebraska wants to again, apparently. I don't know how you're going to do that without playing there, but fair enough. So that may be another piece of you've got to find somebody who can get you indoors down there. Here's the reality. Greg Austin was in Houston. Ryan Held was in Dallas. Mario Verduzco was in Dallas too a little bit, and they didn't crack the door open. Ryan Held was in Kansas City. Didn't crack the door open. They did not get kids from Kansas City, and Ryan Held was from there. Travis Fisher is in St. Louis. They didn't crack the door open. They're not recruiting there. They're not getting guys from there. Those are problems. You have to be able to get the best athletes from 550 miles away. And unfortunately, Nebraska struck out a lot in this cycle, and they have not been able to get some of the best players in the Midwest. And the more often you get players from inside that circle, the better off you are, because the further you get away from Nebraska in your recruiting, it's generally a pretty big shift from high school. Now, maybe the kids from Hawaii are going to be great. They were at one time, but that's not an easy adjustment. California is not an easy adjustment. Casey Rogers has adjusted well. He was from the Northeast, but I think that's a hard adjustment. Some of those kids come from Connecticut or New York, and it takes time. And so that's another piece to watch, is can you find somebody who can recruit the Midwest, specifically Texas? I think that's one thing to watch.
While we're talking real quick on the special teams coordinator thing, to get deeper into the staff weeds, why not, everyone keeps throwing their hands up at, the specialists. What are we going to do? They're specialists. We don't know what we're doing with the specialists. Find a kicking coach. Find a kicking coach to be an analyst.
Yeah.
Is that crazy?
No, you could bring a guy like Chris Brown on board as a special teams analyst, sure. They can't really teach, they can't really coach during practice.
They can steer the coaches in the right directions, though. That would help. Just to give someone who can speak the language.
Yeah,
help them out, an interpreter with the kickers and the special teams guys, so that Scott's not up there saying it's not special teams, it's specialists.
There's not much that the kicking coaches could help. I got to tell you, it's tough. It's a lot of there's a lot of NFL teams don't have it. You just get a good kicker. Now the good thing in the NFL is you can waive a guy and go get another guy, and they're all relatively the same. All these guys are elite. One guy kind of gets in a funk, you can't use him anymore. You can go get somebody else who isn't in a funk. At the college level, if you were to rank the 85 scholarships in terms of importance, the number one scholarship is QB1, right? I'm not sure kicker makes the 85. Punter makes the top, for me, makes the top 40. An elite punter is way more important, in my opinion, than a guy that can go make a kick. And not because it isn't important to make kicks. I'm saying that the difference between Connor Culp last year and Connor Culp this year is just that he's missing kicks. Next year he won't be playing next year, but next year he could make them. Alex Henry was the best place kicker in the history of Nebraska football. Went to the NFL, wasn't very good. Brett Maher, what came after Henry, wasn't as good as Henry, was better in the NFL. Chris Brown, who wasn't in theory as good as either one of them, was a 10-year pro. It's not easy. It just, you have it and then you lose it. And some guys are better when they have wide hash marks. Some are better when they have tight. The kicking piece, you can go out and find a kicker. They will go and find a kicker. Probably at the FCS level is a good place to go. They let a guy go, and Cole Fromm, who's having a very nice season at South Dakota State, he left. The punting piece is the piece they've got to get right. Because the Big Ten has elite punters, and when you can take the ball from your own 25 and kick the ball down to the opponent's 10,
particularly in the Big Ten West, particularly.
Right. They're not going to frickin' score. You've just taken an entire possession and went whoosh. The numbers on how many times you go 90 yards on a drive, like I haven't done this, but if you added up all the drives that started at an opponent's at your own 10 or less and found out how many of them scored, the percentage has to be somewhere around, 4. So when Priestap makes the mistake he makes on that 13-yard punt, this is hard for people to process. That was a bigger mistake than a missed field goal. Not 2 missed field goals, but 1. Because that's killer. Like, you can't do that from your own 35.
Particularly against that team.
That team, but from your own 35. Now, if he had been kicking from his own end zone, that's pretty good. You kick from your own 35, your intention is to put that team down there at 17, and he didn't do it. So, to me, the punting piece is crucial. I don't know. They've got to find somebody who can help them find a punter, and then maybe coach the punter, because the punting since Sam passed away has been really bad. Like, I wish you had been here to see all of it. It's been something. Like, I can't even. It's really, really been something. Talking punts in the stands, and it's not length of punt. It's direction. Priestap was trying to kick it away from the returner, and he kicked it out of bounds. It's the direction. I've seen guys kick the ball 80 yards straight and give up a 35-yard return, which is, And then when they try to kick it a little bit to the left, it's a 9-yard punt. That was Lightbourne. It's unbelievable to me how much Nebraska has struggled in that role. So I think the special teams piece, whether it's Dawson or it's somebody else, somebody has to get a good punter in here. And then once you get him here, you get him for 4 years, because the NFL doesn't need him. NFL doesn't. I mean, they wanted the one guy from LSU, but outside of that, they don't need him. Brad Wing, was that his name? They don't need the other guys.
I want this San Diego State kid.
We're good.
San Diego State kid that's kicking 80-yarders every week.
We're good. You guys can play in college. We've got a bunch of guys up here who are fine. Like, it's a hard job to get in the NFL now because the guys are so good. So it's like an advantage to get one, because once you get one, you've got him for a long time. Iowa's guy, Torrey Taylor, is going to be there for 4 years. He's going to be a pain in Nebraska's ass for 4 years. I think he's only a sophomore. When you looked at this week, and again, you're just new to this, and you're looking at it from the outside, what do you think of Nebraska athletics?
I thought of the old boys club that I thought when I got here, it seemed like Trev wanted to change. Like, Trev wanted to steer away from the lineage type stuff that, you know what I mean? Like, once a Husker, always a Husker, bring everyone back full circle, hang on to the past type deal. But with when I think of the decision to keep Scott, and a lot of the quotes that Trev was speaking this week, I kind of got that same sort of vibe. I was thinking that, as Dirk wrote earlier this week, anyone not named Scott Frost is gone this week. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. And
I'm not sure that anybody not named Scott Frost would have made some of the mistakes that Scott Frost has made.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to make excuses for Scott, but I think part of what happened is when he came back, the level of latitude that he had to do whatever the hell he wanted and to kind of run things the way he wanted to run them probably wasn't helpful. Like, you would only give that kind of control to Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer is, I don't want to get into the morality of Urban Meyer. That's not what I mean when I say that. We can get easily sidetracked into the kind of human being he is. He hurt Florida. Florida remains hurt as a result. Ohio State was not hurt as much. He did bad things. He's a bad human being. That's fine. What I mean by saying Urban Meyer is an all-day, he's going to work at it 24/7. And because I've talked to Tim Beck about this, and Beck's now the offensive coordinator at North Carolina State, but he was at Ohio State with Tom Herman and Urban in 2015 and 2016. And the way that I think you would describe Urban Meyer is somebody who is just really, really intense and
Ruthless.
all over.
Yeah.
Yes, ruthless. And is a CEO and is in everybody's, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what people define as a great CEO today. Somebody who's really, really good at being
They
a
all
CEO.
have a screw loose, it seems.
I think you could, again, it's a loaded conversation to talk about CEOs too, because it's like you can't say that people are good at that without getting into the moral equation. But Scott was given a level of control and autonomy off the top that's rare for a third-year head coach. It's rare.
Which makes it ironic that now he's stepping into more of a CEO role as his duties are becoming more, less focused on specific things.
Right.
That power's being reeled back a little bit.
The challenge
program.
that he had, I think, when he got here is the AD didn't. The AD was, whatever you wanted. I mean, Scott, and I'm not saying Bill was a good guy to work with, but, I think Bill tried to provide some input early, and that it got kind of rebuffed. And Scott had a chief of staff who had been a CEO in the healthcare industry, and I think Scott sort of farmed out a lot of the things that CEO head coaches do to his chief of staff, and his chief of staff, rubbed people the wrong way. And I don't even mind that guy that much. I don't. I would be fair to say I had some disagreements with him over time, but I think part of what happened is, to give you an example, football facility, when it's announced, Scott's out there for like 9 seconds. He says a few words. He walks back in the stadium.
It's on the Memorial Stadium Jumbotron every week.
He walks back into the stadium. Matt Davison handles all the questions. Bill Moose handles all the questions. Scott's in, plotting how they're going to score 7 points against Ohio State in 2019. Not a good day. Scott needs to be the person out there doing that, and someone else needs to be in doing the other thing. But part of Scott's way of handling things, I think, for a couple of years is, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm going to go do the ball coach stuff.
He's an X's and O's guy.
X and O's. And the people, I think, that to some degree that he entrusted to manage all the other elements, they fell short. I think the chief of staff fell short. I think Bill Moose fell short. Bill Moose said unhelpful things, like, we're going to win 9 games, or Urban Meyer's afraid of us. He said unhelpful things along the way. And so I think part of what has happened is now, Frost is in this spot, and he actually has to assume more of the head coaching duties, but he doesn't have the autonomy he did before. It's paradoxical, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it's at. Like, it's now Trev. Trev's kind of the CEO of the whole operation. He's like, the GM or whatever. Scott's the coach. And Trev's like, Scott, you need to hire better people to run your offense, and you need to be a better head coach and talk to your players and get to know your players. And oh, by the way, maybe you don't have a 160-man roster. We'll see. I'm curious to see how big the roster is. I don't know why it's as big as it is. I've said this since the very beginning. Don't see the point. Tell me the difference between 130 and 160. I have no idea. They keep saying, well, it's been for multiple stations in practice, but they're not running them. My understanding is they're not really using the extra 30 other than to be the swag surf patrol at kickoff. I'm not kidding.
It's true. They
have a giant group of
swag
walk-ons.
surf their tails off. They do.
They're like, it's fine. It's fine. Just so you know, in 2018, Scott Frost was like ripping those guys for doing that. Now he's okay with it, and that's fine. But it's like there were just pieces in there. And so I think that's part of the conversation this week is, I don't know if this is going to work, but I think for the first time, Scott Frost has a normal relationship with an AD, and Scott's being asked to do the things that most head coaches do versus I'm going to go inside and try to win the game with my awesome offense. By the way, that isn't going well, and go from there. Enough football.
I have one more football thing I'd like to raise to you, because we talked about it briefly earlier, but not all the way through. I'm curious a little bit more. These last 2 games, you say they matter. You say they want you. It matters for them to win one of them and build some positive momentum into next year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more leaning in the school of, as you said this week, 2022 starts now.
It does.
So why not get a look at some of the maybe deeper portions of the depth chart while we're, because I mean, no, you don't think so?
What deeper portions are you talking about?
Logan Smothers.
Oh.
Logan Smothers.
Do you really want to put him out there against Wisconsin's defense?
I think it's worth seeing what you have.
Yeah.
Unless they know it's not going to work.
Well, it's going to be a hard day for anybody. Wisconsin's got the best defense in the country north of Athens, Georgia. I mean, they're going to hurt teams down the stretch. Just watch. They're going to hurt teams. Nebraska will be lucky to score 10. I don't want to put Logan in that.
Not just
now, if you want to bring Logan in for a run package, that's fine. Hey, Logan, you're going to run the ball here. We're going to give you a lead block and run. That's fine.
Not just there. Guys where you think there might be holes next year. Why not get an early look at that? Maybe not bench guys, maybe not bench stars all the way. Work them into the rotation a little bit more.
They could do that. All the offensive linemen are scheduled to come back in theory. I don't think you want Thomas Fidone and James Carney having to do that against that defense. I don't. I think you probably need to play Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek. What else? Safety. Maybe you could get away with putting a new safety back there instead of Markell for a couple snaps. At corner, I mean, are you going to take Cam Taylor-Britt off the field? I don't think you are. There's just not that, to be honest with you, Jimmy, and I'm not trying to be contrarian, there's not that many spots where, it's quarterback, and you don't want to do that. Maybe if they were playing, Maryland, but you don't want to do that to some kid. Here you go. It's 2:30 in Madison. I wish you were going. You got to cover basketball, and there's a bunch of people yelling F-bombs at you. And oh, by the way, there's a defense over there that's going to sack you 7 times. Here's your experience. That's not fair. It's not fair. So I don't think that would happen at Wisconsin. Maybe against Iowa. I don't know. I think Adrian will get the last 2. Wide receiver. Most of those guys are playing. I don't know why Grimes and Hardy and Neville haven't seen the field. To me, it is a problem. What are they not doing? I don't know. That's one of the big questions. I think that's one of the reasons Matt Lubick's not there. And I think Matt Lubick probably shouldn't have been the wide receivers coach anyway. Should have probably just been given to Becton, and Lubick was just a coordinator. And I think things would have gone better. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. Hoops. Nebraska's 0-1. They lost to Western Illinois. You and I have talked about it. There's good reason. I mean, there's actual, analytical reasons that Nebraska struggled in that game for a half. There's obvious reasons. They rebounded horribly. But Fred Hoiberg's 2 press conferences, the one he gave right after the game, which was 3 minutes long, and the one today, which was 8. I mean, he's ticked. It's not DEFCON 1, but it's DEFCON 3. It feels like he's pressing the urgency button early because he's maybe concerned they're going to lose the team or something. Am I wrong on that?
I don't know. Lose the team seems strong, but there is something to be said about Fred being very upset that they abandoned his ethos and what he wants this team's identity to be so quickly. I mean, from the opening tip, I counted today. These are very unofficial stats, but 45 0 or 1 pass possessions during that game. That is quite a few. And I was talking to, I think Jacob Padilla did the same thing at Hale Varsity. I think he counted that, divided it from the total number of possessions. He said it was 65% of their possessions. That is not good. That is, I mean, and I asked Fred, schematically, is there something different you guys, I asked him today, could the guys who were off the ball have done a little bit more? Because the guys were just standing there. He said, we have to just move the ball. He's putting a lot of onus on the ball handlers, which is Alonzo Verge, Bryce McGowan's, Trey McGowan's, to make that stuff happen for them. And he wants things to look a certain way. He's okay. I think he would be, if you asked him, if he would prefer to lose that game because they missed 35 3-pointers, but they were moving the ball his way, or last night he would prefer, if they lost by 10 and missed 35 3-pointers, he'd prefer to do it that way than what happened last night where they got really close, but they were just driving their heads against the wall over and over and over again. And I also think there's something, any coach would be really, really frustrated with a team who just, you watch it on film, you're watching it back, Wilhelm Breidenbach just gets shoved aside, like, excuse me, for this offensive rebound. CJ Wilcher is, these are just...
He's 6'5" and
he's 6'5". He's got some bulk to him.
Yes.
And he'll stand in front of a guy, but he's not getting low.
Right.
He's not making real contact with guys. People are squirting right through there, and they're either getting a hand on the ball or they're just grabbing it. And when you give up one, when you give up one offensive rebound, you would think that would snap everyone out of it, and they go, oh, we got to go get that. But it wasn't just, at the end of the half, they gave up 8 in 90 seconds or something like that at the end of the first half. So that is a reasonable concern. I think any coach would be really frustrated with that, especially when I'm sure they've been drilling that all preseason long. But yeah, there is something to be said to your point about Fred, all he's talked about the entire offseason is make a simple play. We're a multi-handler offense. We're going to do this together. He's an egalitarian kind of guy. There's, his track record is we're going to have multiple guys that have 25% usage rates, and we're going to have guys who on the right night, CJ Wilcher can be the best player on your offense because we're finding him and the ball's moving and the offense is working how it's supposed to. Last night it just looked the complete opposite.
Guess what? Last year it was a way. It wasn't. It was the same way with Teddy Allen. The year before that it was the same way with Cam Mack. Do they have the same situation with Alonzo Verge?
I think it's very early to say that, and the switching stuff they certainly need to get worked out because everyone is going to, especially after watching that, everyone is going to switch their pick and rolls. But there's some of it was stylistic.
Why don't you describe for our listeners what switching pick and rolls means?
Okay.
There's a presumption that everybody knows that.
Okay,
but
switching pick and roll is very simple. Somebody sets a screen. The generic pick and roll defense would be to the big man comes out a little bit or stays back. He makes a decision and then waits for the guard to get over the screen and find the ball handler again. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that simply enough?
You are.
Switching is we're not going to worry about any of that. Big man, you're guarding the guard now, or whoever set the screen forward, you're guarding the guard now. Guard, you're guarding the big man now. And we'll try to mitigate that on the back end with whatever we need to. But the idea, it's kind of a reverse psychology thing and it worked 100% on Nebraska last night. Alonzo Verge sees a bigger guy on him and thinks, oh, this guy can't move with me. So I'm trying to take him one-on-one. Again and again and again and again. Bryce McGowan gets a switch on a smaller defender or a guy who's not as quick as he is. Oh, I can just go to the rim. There's our offense right there because, if you drive through and someone comes off the shooter, then you can kick out at 3, and the offense can still work that way. But the difference, and Fred explained this really well today, the difference between what could happen in those situations, you're supposed to attack mismatches, but only to a point. If you're trying to attack a mismatch so hard that you're trying to drive through the guy, like if he's in position and you're still trying to keep going, which happened a lot last night when you see Alonzo Verge driving and keep running in the guy, and he keeps trying 15 different crossovers, or he powers through and jumps without a plan and just kind of throws the ball up at the rim and then complains for a foul. That's what you want to avoid. That's when it goes wrong. And to Western Illinois' credit, they handled that stuff really well. They moved their feet really well. But Nebraska fell into the trap. They said, oh, this guy can't stay in front of me, so I'm just going to go. And it didn't work out.
It's interesting. The style that Fred wants to run, they want to run. So a defensive rebound becomes an outlet. A lot of times the point guard, you want him to either rebound it or get it quickly. When it was Delano Banton, it was easier. Banton 6'9".
Verge had double-double last night.
He did. I know. Which often means that it was a long carom, obviously, because he wasn't getting it.
Yeah, they were letting Western shoot a lot of threes.
With Banton, it was easier because there was a confidence that Banton could go get it. I mean, shoot, he was taller than a lot of people and all the rest. And so it was a little easier to run. if they're going to continue to try that style where they want early offense, in the first, 7 seconds shot clock, whatever it is, they're probably going to have to play Eduardo Andre, aren't they? Why didn't he play?
Coach's decision.
Yeah.
That's what Fred told me when I was on the phone with him about the recruits yesterday.
Sure.
He reiterated that today. It's just the decision that they made. They want him to. They're not elaborating on why he's not playing, but I don't even remember which coach it was, but one of the coaches that I met with during the offseason was just saying Eduardo needs to be more consistent. So
sure.
During this exhibition game, Eduardo against Peru State, he looked really good, and it was against even Peru State's backup, so whatever that data point is. Against Colorado, he did get a couple of rebounds, but he also turned the ball over a couple times. Mm-hmm. I think part of the concern there could be they do really like having their big men be playmaking outlets. They like being able to put Derek Walker or Wilhelm Breidenbach at the elbow and saying, here, run some dribble handoff actions or, make a pass to a cutter. Maybe they don't think Eduardo Andre is doing that at a satisfactory level.
I think you've nailed it.
That could be it. It could also be a situation where, again, when I hear consistency, I wonder, I don't know if is he not bringing the motor every day. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that too much, but yeah, that's it. Logic follows. One of your tallest players might help to throw him out there.
Oh, they would have won the game if he played. That's what I believe.
Fair. It's a fair point to make.
Yeah, I mean, if the issue is rebounding, literally offensive rebounding, Andre's one of the third or fourth best rebounders on the team. Maybe the second. He didn't play. Now again, I don't have a problem with that. Like the idea, there's a principle at stake, and Nebraska's not going to sacrifice. Maybe in the ways that they didn't have much of a choice with Cam Mack. Now, you probably don't remember this or you didn't read about it. Cam was either left out of the starting lineup or he was suspended multiple times.
Oh, yeah. We were talking. Chris Bassett and I were talking about this before the game on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, Cam was an unbelievably dynamic player who did not do what the coaches often asked him to do. And so, they had to compromise. They had to compromise a little bit because they didn't have anybody on. I mean, they couldn't score. If he wasn't on the floor, they were kind of, SOL. So then maybe they don't have to compromise as much with Andre. But again, like if he plays, they might win by 4 because he gets a couple of rebounds. And so what I think is interesting, and this is different. I think this is a little bit different from Frost. Hoiberg's different in the sense that he so believes in his principles and so believes in the system that he's put in that, damn it, these guys are going to do it. Like he's going to.
The roster is built around it, so
yeah.
I don't know what other they have to play.
Well, it's sort of built that way, Jimmy. But again, like last night, they can probably win that game if they slow the game down and they run a bunch of set plays. He could have called those plays from the bench and said, "No, you know what? You guys are going to timeout. If you guys are going to screw around all night, we'll just call plays, and you'll run the play I ask you to call, and you don't like that, then." Tough, but we're doing that tonight because you guys all think it's, and one tour. So they could have done that. I think he kind of gave them freedom, figuring second half.
And they did. I think they shot 47% in the second half. They were better. They scored 42 points in the second half.
They did.
They played faster. They did more to make Western Illinois pay for when Nebraska did actually grab a rebound, they could get out and run. Yeah. They found shooters a little bit better, sure. But they still missed some guys in transition.
They gave up 42 as well.
They did because they couldn't rebound in large part.
So to me, the fascinating conversation, and again, I mean, Hoiberg's done it. He's proven. Can he get this team or any team to embrace his principles? Because I was listening to the presser today. You can tell that Fred knows in his mind. He's like, we hit this number and we do this and we do this and we will win the game. And like convincing his players to understand that like the simple act of passing the ball. So he says it. He made a great analogy about it. He's like, you pass the ball and you get a long closeout, or maybe you get a long closeout on the other ones, and the dominoes fall. And you keep toppling dominoes till there's like 3 in the shot clock, and then maybe you have to do something.
Yep.
But you topple the dominoes until they're for 27 seconds.
Defenses can't scramble for that long.
Right.
They can't.
So he gets it in his mind. It's a question of can the players do it? Can they understand the simple act of passing, like driving and kicking, even if that shot's not open, will lead to a shot 3 passes from now that's open and we make.
That's the confounding part. They did it against Colorado, which was obviously a much better team than Western Illinois.
Yeah.
They did it 10 days ago. And then Fred used the phrase when the lights came on. You know, there's an element of that to it. But it was night and day. And again, it's one game. Let's get a larger sample size.
They play a good team tomorrow night.
Sam Houston State isn't that good. They're not. They beat a Division III team by 43 points.
They're better than Western Illinois.
They are. They're ranked higher, but like Western Illinois, like that's why this is so. That's why I'm entertaining the DEFCON 3 conversation, because Western Illinois, not only are they bad, they are bad in a way that was conducive to how Nebraska is good. Western Illinois was one of the worst 3-point defense teams last year.
Yeah.
They weren't a good offensive rebounding team
right.
last year. They were, in the 200s in that statistic last year. That's why it's so confounding that the Nebraska lost the way it did. It is not good. It's about as bad of a start as they could have had.
We're going to do another podcast on Tuesday. That'll be the night of the Creighton game.
Yeah.
I watched Creighton last night, or Monday night, Tuesday night. I'm going to watch them again tonight. At this moment, I don't like Nebraska's chances to win that game, but we'll see.
I think they'll be favored.
Creighton's really athletic.
I think they'll be favored.
And they're not skilled like the way that they were last year, but they've got guys who they can rebound. I mean, they've got Kaluma's a good rebounder. I just don't like the look of it right now. We'll see. Maybe that'll change. But when you watch Creighton just doesn't stop. They're just relentless. And so sooner or later they overwhelm opponents. And they played a horrible first half. They were down like 15. And they end up winning by 13 because because they stick to their system. And eventually it works. And the key for Nebraska is going to be, do they stick to what Hoiberg tells them to do? And there'll be games where, and I've said this to you, there was 2 or 3 games last year I thought where if Hoiberg just slowed this down, they probably would have won. But they didn't. And they lost by 7. But if they just stick to a system, they're going to double their wins. The question is, are they going to actually?
Through one data point, no.
Man, that's it. I heard from a lot of, I've got a lot of people, friends who like Nebraska basketball more than Nebraska football. So we're clear. So, like, there's people who live and die with the Husker Hoops team more than they football. They were down.
It was ugly to watch.
Well, I mean, that was
ugly to watch.
That was a gut punch.
It was
for some fans.
We'll find out what Fred
only 9,000 people at the game too. That surprised me a little bit.
Fred was saying all off season. We'll find out what this team is made of when they hit adversity. They hit adversity in a very small sense last night. Didn't handle it very well, which now it's adversity on a much larger scale. We'll see how they bounce back.
Do you like watching Fred's reactions when things don't go well?
My favorite one was it's not that he's so animated on the sidelines. It's just that any subtlety conveys a lot of emotion from Fred.
Yes.
And when Western Illinois, I think they had 3 or 4 offensive rebounds on one possession to take the lead right at the end of the half. And the way he shook his head, he only shook his head, but the way he shook his head, I mean, you might as well have just kicked his dog right in front of him.
I like the one where I think it was the last possession of the first half, and he just swiped his hand.
Yep.
It was terrible. It wasn't a good possession. No. I get a kick out of him. Picks time. All right, let's do this fast. All right, Evan's up 5 on you and 12 on me. So
I don't know if we're going to catch him.
No, either. North Carolina at Pitt. Pitt. Evan has UNC.
Great.
Georgia at Tennessee.
Georgia.
Evan has Georgia. Purdue at Ohio State.
I was in the state of Ohio the last time Purdue beat Ohio State, and they thumped them. I think that stuff sticks with the Buck. I don't know if it will be 10 years before Ohio State underestimates Purdue again. Give me Ohio State.
Ohio State. Evan had Ohio State. Michigan at Penn State.
Oof. I'll go Penn State.
Michigan for me. Evan has Michigan. Oklahoma at Baylor. Evan has Baylor.
Man, I was ready to go. I would have been ready to pick Baylor if it wasn't for Baylor last week. I'll go Oklahoma.
Me too.
I like Caleb Williams.
I like Oklahoma in that game. Yeah. Texas A&M at Ole Miss. Evan has A&M.
I'm going Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Lane train, baby.
Deep down, what do I really think is going to happen in that game? Ole Miss. Rutgers at Indiana. Evan has Indiana.
That's a barn burner. Wow. I will say I can't. This is a strategic move. I cannot, in good faith, lose another game on Evan by betting on Rutgers. So I'll go Indiana.
I'm taking Indiana too. Rutgers is, yeah. That's a. When Scott says big fix, I get it. It's not the same fix as Rutgers has. Rutgers has a 5-year fix.
Yeah.
Miami at Florida State.
Same fix or I'm sorry, they don't have the same fix as Rutgers has. Rutgers has the same number of wins. Am I correct?
They do, but
I know
it's not the same.
Well, and they
It's
beat
just
Illinois.
not-
They
it's
beat
just not
Illinois.
the same.
They beat Illinois.
By the end of each football season, Rutgers is really struggling.
Yeah.
And if Nebraska had played Illinois in the middle of the season, Nebraska would have beat them by 30.
Of course.
It just.
And if Illinois played
I
Rutgers,
could talk for 17 minutes about why I thought the Ireland thing was a bad idea, and I
Yeah.
still do. I don't know why you would want to play a game early just to send your kids, your players to Ireland. I don't get it. I wouldn't do it if I were them, and I'm looking forward to going, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go play on a foreign, in a foreign country, a Big Ten team to start season. Wouldn't do it.
it's a weird move with as much pressure is going to be on them next
If
year
I'm
too.
Notre Dame and I'm playing Navy, I'll do it. I'm
Yeah.
not doing what they're doing.
Sure.
Miami at Florida State.
Oof. I'll take Miami. Trending up.
Evan has Miami. I'm taking FSU.
Okay.
Kansas at Texas. I put this on as a joke.
Texas.
Evan has Texas. I'll take
Kansas
Texas.
is not back.
North Carolina State at Wake Forest.
Oof. Give me NC State.
Evan has Wake Forest. I will take Wake Forest. Notre Dame at Virginia. A lot of points in this one.
Yeah. Man, Virginia kind of got fun out of nowhere this year. I will take Notre Dame.
Evan has Notre Dame. I will take Virginia. Minnesota at Iowa. Evan has Iowa.
Wow. What a football game.
Yeah. One of my favorites. My favorite trophy of all the trophies is that one.
Okay.
The Big Pig.
The Big
Florida
Pig.
Roadtail.
I like PJ in that one.
Me too. I like Minnesota as well to beat Iowa. That is our podcast for the week. We'll be back on Tuesday to recap whatever the players say about all their coaches being fired on Monday and to discuss the Nebraska-Creighton basketball game that's coming up that night. For Jimmy, I'm Sam. This is the Pick 6 Podcast.